I'm going to talk a little bit today about some important spring home maintenance tips. If you live in a historical home, this will be especially important to you. So, um, for instance, we have old wood siding, and this has been painted, but it needs a little bit of touch up, which actually, as I think about this is more than just a spring maintenance tip. This is probably like just the joy of an old home. Go ahead. Stop. I'm inside now since we have a rush of cars. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me a little bit better. And the state of the outside of my house brings me to some basic maintenance tips that you can be doing this spring. First of all, it is gorgeous out. So while it is pretty, take the time to walk around your house with a list with your significant other if you live with somebody, and make a list of the things that you see that might need to be done to your home. Most of us don't really walk all the way around our house that frequently. We drive into the garage or pull into the carport, walk in the house. We use our outdoor space. We see what's there. And then other than that, we're not necessarily looking at our house. So take this opportunity in this gorgeous weather before it gets too hot, walk around, make notes. Something you can do if you do notice some peeling paint, which typically is going to come first and trim areas, is you can lightly sand where it's starting to peel and touch up the paint. If you have the original paint color, that's going to be super helpful. So for trim paint, that stays about the same. If you have white trim, that shouldn't be super difficult. I will tell you that painting just a little patch on your house, if you have a color on your home, that's going to be harder to match because unfortunately paint companies actually change the base color regularly. So even if you have the color, it might be slightly different. So you might have to, when you're repainting, if you want to break it into chunks, it's probably going to need to be done by sections of a house. So you could decide to paint one half or one quarter, one side of your house 1 year if you're needing to break it down, but it's going to be hard to do just a section at a time. So that's one thing that I would recommend doing. I also would recommend that you make sure that your gutters are clean and that you have downspout extensions on your gutters. You can find downspout extensions at Lowe's and Home Depot for like $10 or $15, and making sure that the flow of water is away from your foundation is hugely, hugely important. That's the major cause of foundation issues, is water pooling inappropriately or getting moisture issues in your crawl space, or if you have a basement, getting leaks in the basement. So you want to make sure that water is directed away. If you have downspout extensions but you don't have clean gutters, then they don't matter anyway because the water is just going to pour down the side of your house. Something that you can do just to see if there are any issues with your gutters is on a rainy day, look out your windows, or if you want to brave the storm, put on your raincoat, go outside, walk around, see if there are places where the water is just pouring over. If you live in a 2-story home, you should consider paying someone to clean your gutters just for safety's sake, especially if you have a basement and it's really like 3 stories. That is probably worth spending some of your money to make sure a professional is doing that job. So if you're going to pay someone, go ahead and get it scheduled. And you can actually schedule them to come every 6 months where you're just automatically on their calendar. And because gutters really should be cleaned every 6 months, ideally, unless you live with no trees around you. But if you have trees at all around you, you're going to want to have the gutters cleaned every 6 months. The third maintenance tip that you should strongly consider is dealing with your HVAC system. So Letitia is going to be sharing in a little while. She just had to replace an entire unit that she had basically bought into when they bought their property, and it finally died. And she's going to go into the details of why that was so important. So sometimes you do need just to replace the whole unit, but in the meantime, you can maintain the life of your unit and also the efficiency of your unit if you regularly change your air filters. And we change ours every 2 months. We have 3 animals and there's a lot of fur. And so I have a reminder on my phone that it just pops up every 2 months, and I let my husband know it's time to change those filters again. And hugely important. One thing I want to note is that some HVAC systems actually have filters on the air handler unit, which is typically in your crawl space, your basement, or in an attic. And most people never look at the actual air handler. If you have a filter on that, it also needs to be changed regularly. So you need to know if you actually have one. If it is fairly accessible, then you should be able to change it. But if it isn't, I would strongly recommend hiring a professional, getting an entire just system check, and ask them if there are any alternatives so that there is not a filter on that system, but instead is on the return vents, which is where most of us have our air filters. So there are 3 simple tips that you can do going into this spring. You can make sure that you are taking care of any paint that's beginning to peel, making a list of any other little projects that need to be done. With that, make sure that look up at your roof actually, because with strong winds, sometimes some shingles might come off your roof. Even if you have a fairly new roof, that can happen. And so that's something else to look at as you're walking around your house, kind of assessing what's going on. Make sure you have those downspout extensions and your gutters are clean. And then also make sure that you are regularly changing those air filters.